Prime Minister Mark Carney has pledged to reach NATO's new target of spending 5% of GDP on defense by 2035.
Alberta Premier Danielle Smith launches the Alberta Next Panel, aimed at gathering public opinion on how Alberta should advocate for itself against the feds.
A civil liberties group is reopening a case involving a BC university cancelling a free speech club talk on Antifa Violence, saying the school must respect freedom of expression rights. Hello Canada, it's Thursday, June 26th, and this is the True North Daily Brief. I'm Isaac Lamoureux.
And I'm Clayton DeMaine.
We've got you covered with all the news you need to know. Let's discuss the top stories of the day and the True North exclusives you won't hear anywhere else. Prime Minister Mark Carney has pledged to reach NATO's new 5% of GDP spending on defense target by 2035, giving his government 10 years to meet the new goal. He also stated that Canada is finally on track to meet its initial agreement to spend 2% of GDP on defense this year after years of delays. During a NATO summit in The Hague on Wednesday, Carney announced Canada's pledge to raise the nation's 2% of its GDP defense spending commitment to 3.5% and 1.5% for industrial and infrastructure by 2035. He told reporters, quote, "With increasingly open Arctic waters and rapid advances in cyber and AI and quantum with advanced missile capacities, we can no longer rely on our geography to protect us. As the global landscape shifts, the collective security created by the alliance remains the most effective way of protecting the security of Canadians, so together with our allies, we must ensure that NATO remains strong, unified, and ready to confront the threats." He said infrastructure and industrial investments will include ports, airports, transportation, infrastructure, resilient telecommunications, emergency preparedness systems, and the development and exportation of critical minerals. Investments, he said, will largely improve Canada's economy as well as defense. Carney said, quote, "These are responsibilities we have today to Canadians and responsibilities that, by and large, we are fulfilling. Now we are going to do a more proper accounting of that and a more strategic set of investments in that." He said a review of the spending will take place in 2029, notably after U.S. President Donald Trump is set to leave office. So, Clayton, how will Carney reach that 5% of GDP target? Will this mean deepening ties with U.S. defense companies?
So during the press conference, Carney confirmed that he was currently engaged with European partners on big ticket defense items such as submarines and fighter jets. Now, does that mean there will be no procurement from U.S. companies? We'll see. U.S. defense companies are closer to us and are so big that Canada really has to go out of its way to find other partners. Submarines cost anywhere from $500 million to $1 billion. And there have been discussions about Canada potentially procuring up to 12 new submarines. So that could cost up to $100 billion. It's hard to imagine that losing potentially $100 billion on submarines alone wouldn't make U.S. manufacturers annoyed at Trump for his tariffs and antagonizing Canada to the point where it's now looking to Europe for these procurement deals. That's not even counting the estimated $19 billion that companies such as Lockheed Martin could be missing out on from Canada attempting to hit NATO's new target with the fighter jets. During the press conference, Carney all but said Canada would formally join NATO. He said our values align, and as the EU is described as a union growing ever closer together, he said Canada would be trying to deepen its relationship with the EU in the same vein. He said a good percentage of the new spending would already just be developing Canada's economy through those infrastructure deals. Even if we don't need to defend ourselves, it would still improve our economy as well as our defense. It would improve Canada's economy as well as its defense. Premier Danielle Smith has launched the Alberta Next Panel, a new province-wide consultation platform aimed at gathering public input on how Alberta can better assert its constitutional powers and push back against what Smith describes as Ottawa's continued economic interference. Announced Tuesday through a video posted to X, Smith said the panel is a response to what she called, quote, Ottawa's economic attacks and a, quote, status quo that threatens our province's economic future and way of life. Over the coming months, the Alberta Next Panel will hold in-person and virtual town halls across the province, providing residents with a platform to engage with policy experts. Over the coming months, the Alberta Next Panel will hold in-person and virtual town halls across the province, providing residents with a platform to engage with policy experts, government officials, and constitutional scholars. The goal is to determine which provincial reforms should be put to a referendum next year. Among the ideas under consideration is the creation of an Alberta Provincial Police Service, which would replace the RCMP in providing local policing across the province. Smith's government is also exploring withdrawing from the Canada Pension Plan and establishing an independent Alberta pension plan that would be managed by the province. Another proposal would see Alberta exit its tax collection agreement with the Canada Revenue Agency, allowing the province to collect its own personal income taxes, a move Smith says would increase transparency and autonomy. The panel will also seek public feedback on the prospect of Alberta assuming more control over immigration policy, with the stated goal of protecting the province from what the government calls, quote, out of control federal immigration levels. So there's a lot in this interestingly named Alberta Next panel. So Isaac, is this a move to court Albertans keen on separating from Canada? And will it be enough to satisfy those Albertans who want to secede from Confederation?
Well, Clayton, I think saying that the move was made to court Alberta separatists would be at least slightly inaccurate, being that it doesn't consider the full context. Firstly, Smith announced that she would chair the Alberta Next Panel back at the start of May. The panel will consist of leaders in the judicial, academic, and economic spheres. And as you said, they will conduct numerous online and in-person town halls to discuss Alberta's future in Canada and propose potential referenda. Therefore, it's more so a panel to gauge public opinion so that the provincial government can act accordingly, which I would argue is a democratic process that any provincial resident would want from their government. Let's remember that Smith has said time and again that she wants Alberta to remain a part of Canada, but she has also said that if there is a clear majority of Albertans that want to separate, she will not stand in their way. Again, a clear demonstration of the democratic process. She has said that she would put separation to a vote in 2026 if the required number of signatures were met, and it's looking like that will be the case. Smith previously said, quote, the vast majority of these individuals are not fringe voices to be marginalized or vilified. They are loyal Albertans. They are quite literally our friends and neighbors who've just had enough of having their livelihoods and prosperity attacked by a hostile federal government. So these panels may help Albertans better determine whether they endorse separation or not, and they'll also hear concerns and benefits raised by others and potentially even the government. The Alberta Prosperity Project, a leading separatist group, is also doing a similar thing as they travel province-wide, conducting forums highlighting all the benefits of separation, especially from an economic standpoint. A Canadian civil liberties group is seeking an appeal in a case involving the University of British Columbia's 2019 cancellation of a talk on Antifa violence hosted by the school's Free Speech Club. The original decision found that the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms does not apply to UBC, meaning it cannot be sued as a public institution under the Charter. The Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms announced it has submitted an appeal request to British Columbia's Court of Appeal to overturn a Supreme Court of British Columbia decision. The BCSC initially found that the UBC wasn't a public institution and that the province couldn't be held liable for its actions. On March 13, 2024, the Free Speech Club, Noah Alter, Cooper Asp, and Jared Yeager, now a journalist with the Western Standard, filed a notice of civil claim against the university seeking charter damages and relief from both the province and the school. The club and students claim that UBC violated their Charter of Rights and Freedoms after canceling an event called, quote, Understanding Antifa Violence, that the student-run club had hosted at the school. The school cited concerns about, quote, emotional safety and security of the campus community. According to the JCCF announcement, there are, quote, two central issues in this case. One is whether universities are subject to the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms and must, therefore, protect freedom of expression. The second is whether the province is liable for charter damages caused by UBC. So, Clayton, are there any other battleground cases that could determine the future of free expression rights in Canada currently underway?
Yeah, so there's a few cases going on that could really affect the state of freedom of expression rights in the future in Canada. Josh DeHaas, a former journalist and a civil liberties lawyer with the Canadian Constitution Foundation, told True North last year his list of key civil liberties cases to watch out for this year. One of those was whether or not the Emergencies Act was constitutional, which could determine thresholds on how freedom of assembly rights are handled by the courts. But there's also a case many listeners might not even realize is being challenged. Most people are familiar with the NSICOP secrecy law, which bars those who read the foreign influence reports, which come from the National Security Intelligence Committee, bars them from sharing the contents of those reports. We saw Pierre Poilievre refuse to read these documents, saying it would have gagged him. So there is a law professor, Ryan Alford, who is challenging that law, saying it's unconstitutional to gag parliamentarians, as free speech was first given to parliamentarians. He argues it violates the long-held English Parliament tradition of parliamentary privilege. The Superior Court of Canada actually agreed with Alford that it violates those free expression rights held by parliamentarians. So this year, the case will be heard by the Supreme Court of Canada, as the government of Canada doesn't want to let go of the bill without a fight. Another interesting one is Quebec's Bill 21, which bans public employees from expressing their religion. The secularly driven Quebec government have been fighting for this law since 2019 by using the non-withstanding clause to override the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. But the Quebec government's use of the clause is being challenged with arguments expected to be heard in fall of this year. And that's not going into certain bills that were killed by the prorogation of Parliament before the election, such as the Online Harms Act, commonly criticized for its censorship of hate speech online, or so-called hate speech online, and the NDP private members bill to criminalize, quote, residential school denialism, which is likely to be reintroduced into Parliament since the Liberals are still in power.
That's it for today, folks. Thanks for tuning in. You can stay on top of new episodes every weekday by subscribing to the Daily Brief on iTunes and Spotify. Also, while you're at it, make sure to hit us with a 5-star rating and please leave a review.